Okay, so here we have the oh good grief, the worksheet that we were doing for homework. And you have to fill this out, so I'm going to go over the answers by filling it out right now in front of you, so you should check your work. So look at the example and complete the chart by identifying if it's a phenotype or a genotype. So the word phenotype, you remember when we first went over the words, I remember to tell you pheno means face. So when I look at your face, I can only see what you look like. Genotype, this part is the gene. So this is like what's in your DNA. What's your DNA say? So this is what does it look like, and this is what's in your DNA. And the two things are going to be similar, but not identical. So that is where we are with that. So my example is 2 eyes. Is 2 eyes an example of a genotype or a phenotype? If I look at you, I see your 2 eyes. I can't see if your DNA says anything other than that. All I can see on your face are the 2 eyes. So this is a phenotype. Then I see 2 letter E's. So we talked about that in genetic shorthand, we're going to use a single letter to represent the traits. My cat is coming over here. If his head gets in the shot, I'm sorry. Colby, stop. He's a lover, not a fighter. Anyway, the big E's. These are what we would use to represent someone's genotype. So when we see this, it means genes that are found in their DNA. It's a genotype. Curly hair. If I look at you, I would see whether or not you had curly hair. And that is a phenotype. HH. Those are going to tell me what traits you got from each parent. You got one H from one parent, that H from another parent. So that is your genotype, as is big F, little f. And hitchhiker's thumb. Hitchhiker's thumb is really cool. I don't have one. So basically you would put your thumb up like you're gonna hitch a ride. And if your thumb is actually pointing backwards like this, normally, that's absolutely normal. There's nothing you can do about it. Like your thumb is pointing this way almost. That's a hitchhiker's thumb. It is a genetic trait. But I would see it in your hand. I don't know if you have 2 genes or 1 gene for it. So it is a phenotype. Colby, your purring is very loud. Shh. I always have a pet that like gets involved in my videos. In my 8th grade video, the dog was like barking like nonstop. It was crazy. Anyway, look at the genotype listed and complete the chart by identifying if it's heterozygous or homozygous, and if that phenotype is dominant or recessive. So, what the heck are they talking about? These are the genotypes right there. Look, they kind of gave you the answers up here. So if you were having trouble with this, you got to read the whole paper and see if there's anything else you can do before you tell me, I don't know. So the genotype, big E, is it heterozygous or homozygous? And really the key is right in the beginning. Hetero means different and homo means same. So these 2 letters are identical. So this would be considered a homozygous. And I'll just abbreviate by writing homozygous. And that is dominant or recessive. Well, both of them are capital. And we said that we will represent the dominant trait with a capital letter and the recessive trait with lowercase. Every time the dominant trait is present, it shows up in the phenotype. So this person, not only are they homozygous for the dominant trait, but their phenotype bless you, Colby, will also have the dominant form. So this actually comes from a lab where we had monsters, and they had different numbers of eyes. So 2 eyes was a capital E, 1 eye was a lowercase e. So this organism, big E, big E, would have the dominant trait. So that organism would have 2 eyes. But if you got little e, which was also homozygous, then you would have the recessive trait, and you would only have 1 eye, one-eyed monster. Big E, little e is heterozygous because they are different. They're not the same letter. One of them is the dominant form, and the other one is the recessive form. Dominant, recessive. This is still going to have the dominant phenotype. That means if these were the monsters, this one has 2 eyes, this one also has 2 eyes. Even though they're different forms of the alleles, I would see the same thing in the phenotype. Continuing on, little t would be homozygous. Oops. And it is recessive because they're both the lowercase letter. And we use this to represent height usually. We talked about pea plant height last time, so that's where we're going with it. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then we have big T, little t, which is heterozygous. I'm just going to write HE. That is dominant because there is a capital letter. Big M, that's HO, homozygous, and that is dominant because they're both capitalized. Little m, oops, sorry. I know my view is not as wide as I want it to be, but that's okay. Little m is also homozygous. Well, I'm writing crazy letters. But because they're both lowercase, then it's recessive. All right, so this was really like an application of those vocab terms, which I told you to memorize. If you had trouble doing this, you did not study your vocab terms very well. All right, so use your knowledge of genetic shorthand to answer the following questions. What letter represents brown fur? Brown fur? What are they talking about? Probably you skipped reading this sentence right here, which is essential. Basically, genetics is a bunch of word problems, so you got to read all the words. Brown fur in rabbits is dominant to white. So what I like to do when I first start doing one of these problems is to put a box around the dominant trait and just underline twice the recessive trait. It's just something I do. You don't have to do it, but it really helps. So what letter represents brown fur? Well, in genetic shorthand, you use the first letter of the dominant trait, which is brown, to represent both. Capital B for brown fur, and then the lowercase is the recessive, so that is lowercase or little b. Now, this is just an allele. You could get one allele from each parent. If I was writing about an organism, I'm not going to just write one letter. You have to write 2. You get one letter from mom and one letter from dad, one from each parent. What would the genotype be for heterozygous brown? So heterozygous means different. If we look back up here, these heterozygous was big E, or big T, little t. So I'm using the letter B because I'm talking about brown fur. I'm going to have big B, little b. And that is heterozygous brown. What would the genotype be for homozygous white? They're both the same, both the white allele, and white is being represented by a lowercase b because it's not dominant. And that's how you know it's not dominant, because it's lowercase. So I would use little b, heterozygous brown. What would the genotype be for homozygous brown? That would be 2 big B's, big B, big B. Could there be an organism that is heterozygous white? Now we're talking about a rabbit, brown and white fur, heterozygous white. Is there one? How would I write that? Heterozygous means 2 different alleles. Anytime you write 2 different alleles, you get that. If I wrote this, I would immediately cross that out and tell you you're wrong, because we never write the capital letter second. You always write the capital letter first. So you're always getting this. And it's to remind us that anytime you have a capital letter, it's always going to be the dominant trait. So this rabbit would be brown. So can you ever have heterozygous white or heterozygous any recessive trait? No. And the answer is the definition of dominant. Anytime the dominant trait is present, it shows up in the organism. So if you get this, heterozygous means 2 different, it's going to be brown. Okay? So now we're going to talk a little bit about my favorite guy, Gregor Mendel. So just really quickly, you don't have to write this part down yet. Okay? So Mendel was a monk. We talked a little bit about him. He was in the video last week. And his job was to observe the food crops. He was a gardener. He was a teacher. He was pretty awesome. And this is a long time ago, in the 1800s. So he was gardening. And one of the organisms that he used frequently, because once he started gardening and trying to produce a lot of food, he noticed that this was happening. So he used pea plants, and these are the kinds of plants that produce like the little green peas, which are not the dominant ones. Yellow is dominant. What? Pea plants. Pea plants are really interesting, and they actually turned out working really well because pea plants only have what's called complete dominance. One trait completely dominates the other, and that is what we have been talking about. Oops, I'm going to move this a little bit so you can see what I'm writing. Okay, pea plants, complete dominance. I don't have this set up the way I did last time because you could definitely see everything then. Maybe I had it up higher. I'll just hold it here for a second. All right, so in Mendel's pea plants, they were completely dominant. See if I can put this down without it falling. Ah, sorry. It's a delicate balance here. Just in case you're wondering what's happening, this is what's happening. This is my daughter's, it's actually like my grandmom's little play high chair. And I'm just using this crossbar because it's lifted up in the air because on the table, there's Colby, he's like literally like on the notes, to hold this up because I don't have a tripod or anything like that, which I probably should get one to do this. Anyway, all right, so I'll make sure to not write past there. Okay. Back to Mendel and the pea plants. Complete dominance. So when we were talking about the pea plants before, they have different traits. And to help you understand the words a little bit better. Some of the traits: height, the color, flower color, all kinds of things, right? So in pea plants, though, there's just 2 heights: tall, short. What? There's no mediums. Nothing else. For color, they can be yellow or green peas. The flowers are white or purple. That's it. There's just 2 kinds. Now, in one group of plants, you can have lots of different variations because you can have a lot of different mixes of these. But for each individual trait, there's only 2 options. Now, I talked about before humans. Humans do not have this. So if I write a human here, and even in humans, if you just talk about eye color, eye color in humans, is there just one? No, there's green, blue, brown, hazel, which is like a mix. There's a lot of options. And some of them are related to other things. So it's totally different in humans, okay? There are some human traits, like that hitchhiker's thumb, that are complete dominance. There's just 2 forms. Either you have the hitchhiker's thumb or you don't. And that's it. So there are some human traits like that, but most human traits are not like that. All right. So Mendel was studying the pea plants, and he was trying to manipulate these traits, which is great. So he was causing the pea plants to produce more pea plants that had the same kind. And he called those the pea generation, P for parents. So one of his very famous experiments, and I'm turning the paper over, is that he started with the pea generation. You literally write like capital P and then the word generation, okay? Of tall parent and another tall parent. And what do you think all the offspring were? Bingo, they were tall. 100%, because now we're going to talk about probability and percentages. 100% of the offspring were tall. All right. Then he had the same thing, but he did it with short. So he had a short parent with a short parent, and these are pea plants. Just keep reminding yourself, 100% short. Awesome. What do you think he did next? He took the tall offspring and the short offspring, and he made them cross. So now this is called the F1. I had a low battery warning. I don't know if that affected you. Sorry. The F1 generation. And the F1, he took a tall times a short. And what do you think he got? A lot of people probably think 50% were tall and 50% were short. But that's wrong. Instead, 100% were tall. And he was like, hey, what now? That's weird. So he kept going. He took these offspring, which are considered the F2. So this is a P for, that's the parents. The F1 is called first filial. Filial means sons. We had daughter cells, so now we have son generations. Everybody's covered. And now we have the F2. So the next group would be the F3. And then F4, so on and so forth. Anyway, so he took these talls. So he took the F2 tall, multiplied it by another one. And what did he get? 100% tall? No. He actually got 75% tall and 25% short. So short, which was way back here, these two parents, one was tall, one was short, all the offspring were tall, was hiding. The short was being covered up because these two parents were both tall, but they had these tall and short parents. So how does that work? Well, scientists developed much later. Mendel's work was lost for many, many years and then was rediscovered. It was super exciting, and then it was used to develop the Punnett Square. Okay, so the Punnett Square is it's almost like a fortune teller. Like, you know that little thing you open and close and open and close, and it like tells you your fortune? This is like the same thing. It's like probability. Okay, Punnett Square. So a Punnett Square, really quickly, has 4 sections. Now, you can have much bigger Punnett Squares, but we're going to keep it simple and stick to just 1 trait, 2 parents, and nothing is connected, no linked traits, because some traits are linked to whether you're male or female, or if you get 1 trait, then you definitely get this other one, but maybe not. It's like complicated, of course. And we're only in 7th grade, so we're going to keep it simple. So in our Punnett Square, because we have 4 squares, this is just like $1, right? How many cents are in $1? 100 cents. 100% is the whole thing, right? So each square is going to be worth 25%. 25%, 25%, 25%. Because they're like quarters. 4 quarters equals $1. 1, 2, 3, 4, $1. Okay? All right. I'm going to pause this video because it's getting long and make a second one to talk about how to produce a Punnett Square.